State Attorney Monique Worrell coming to the podium now to speak about some efforts to combat the politicization of investigations. Let's listen in live from Orlando.
An audit is underway, and we look forward to sharing those findings with the public soon. Another issue, though, that we've uncovered and will be discussing today is the politicization of criminal investigations under the prior administration. No prosecutor's office in this country should be used as a political weapon. It's time to bring clarity, transparency, and lawful resolution to a process that was broken under the appointed administration. I want to give you a little background. As some of you have already reported, there has been a baseless and defamatory lawsuit filed yesterday accusing my prior administration of destroying public records. The lawsuit falsely states that records were destroyed at my direction. First, let me be very clear. There was no such direction that was ever given from me to anyone on my team during my time in office. This lawsuit arises from a sham and politically and also selfishly motivated investigation in which those actively engaged in the investigation have repeatedly shown themselves to be just plain bitter and disgruntled about this community's decision to re-elect me as their state attorney. The politicization of our office's investigations that this whole ordeal has exposed. This is the real issue. And it's bigger than any petty sham grievances that they may have. So I am, in fact, taking action. First, in the coming days, my office will be filing a petition for declaratory judgment, seeking intervention from the court regarding public disclosure obligations related to this case. This motion was necessary in order to establish what, if any, records are suitable for release without violating the law surrounding grand jury proceedings. The courts are needed to provide the independence and transparency that is necessary to properly resolve this matter that exists because of a broken, politicized process under the previous administration. Second, I am developing a policy that will ensure that this office adopts best practices for conducting administrative and criminal investigations, ensuring that they are kept separate and independent as is done in other governmental agencies. Such practices were unfortunately not followed under the appointed administration, resulting in politics to subvert the process and divert precious taxpayer resources in pursuit of a political witch hunt against me for no other reason other than that I successfully won my re-election. This was an abuse of power of the executive staff of the former administration, misusing their authority to pursue purely politically motivated investigation of their political rival. That is not how justice in this country should function. In fact, they didn't even really cover their tracks here well. A supplemental investigation was initiated just 2 days after I won re-election. Here's the timeline of what happened. On November 5th, 2024, I was overwhelmingly re-elected to this seat by the people of this circuit. The appointed administration then abandoned the primary mission of this office and instead chose to put politics over public safety, attempting to subvert the will of the voters. On November the 6th at 7 o'clock in the morning, Chief Assistant Ryan Williams sent an email to the staff of this office in which he specifically stated, the leaders of this office have no plans to begin looking for work elsewhere. Now, during that time, there were a lot of questions in the media. Well, what does that mean? Are they not going? Are they not going to hand over power? Well, here's what I can now tell you that it meant. It meant that on the very next day, on November the 7th, just 2 days after my re-election, The executive team directed a supplemental investigation of which I was the target. On December 2nd, 2024, Ryan Williams presented the findings of that investigation to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, requesting that a grand jury be convened based on the results of his investigation. The appointed executive team intentionally conducted a criminal investigation under the pretense of an administrative investigation for the sole purpose of ensuring that the defamatory and false information used to convene a grand jury would become public in the event that there was no indictment. Staff members were pressured and intimidated into complying with the demands of the appointed administration under threat of political consequences. No employee should be subject to intimidation or coerced in an action that is politically or personally motivated. Not only did these tactics undermine morale and professionalism within the office, but it also set a precedent for the abuse of authority and negatively impacted our already fragile workforce. This entire effort was part of an attempt to again undermine the will of the voters of this circuit and keep me from taking office. They abused their power and misused the resources of this office. Again, the fact that this investigation ramped up immediately after I won re-election tells you everything you need to know about its true purpose. It's political, not in the pursuit of justice. The voters made their choice clear, but some clearly didn't like the outcome. Rather than accept the will of the people, they chose to waste taxpayer resources on a partisan witch hunt, hoping it would prevent me from taking office and silence this community's voice in deciding who should represent them. Despite their best efforts, they will not prevail. I will continue to focus on the matters that the voters of this circuit sent me back to this seat to focus on. I will focus on solutions to real problems instead of to problems that don't exist. And my actions today will ensure that the sole motivation behind any investigation in this circuit is in fact the pursuit of justice and not politics. These policies will also help safeguard taxpayer resources from being wasted on politically driven investigations that serve no purpose other than to erode public trust in our criminal justice system. I will continue to lead and focus on the business of the people. Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to have a brief question and answer period. So if anyone has a question for the state attorney, now's your opportunity.
So to clarify, are you going to be releasing the documents from the internal investigation so that the public can review what was done in the timeline that you laid out?
So what I mentioned was that our office is filing a petition for declaratory judgment with the court so that the court can determine whether or not those documents can be released. I ran on a platform of transparency, and it is always my intention to be transparent with the public. However, there are laws that govern information that can and cannot be released. It is the position of this office that the information that has been laid out in this defamatory lawsuit are not only false, but also protected by grand jury secrecy laws. We will be filing a petition for declaratory judgment with the court to have the court intervene in that particular situation.
State Attorney, is your understanding that investigation by F. Daly and Mr. Gladson, is that over? Have you been fully cleared in that? Is that done?
So I want to be clear. I am not at liberty to comment at all on any grand jury investigations. I'm just not. And this is not Monique Worrell telling you that I don't want to talk about it. I'm telling you that in the state of Florida, grand jury proceedings are secret proceedings, and I cannot comment on them. But I can tell you that had I been indicted, then you probably would have found out about it.
And just a question about the complaint. that you're referring to, the petition for the mandamus filed by William Eric Edwards, when did he leave the office? When did he stop? Or was that after, what's his timeline when he left the state attorney's office?
So it's really interesting. Eric Edwards was initially hired by Jeff Ashton as his chief investigator. He was kept on by State Attorney Aramis Ayala, and then at his request, he was kept on by me when I took office in 2021. He then facilitated the transition of my removal from office and stayed on and became a very vocal part of this sham investigation against me. Now, what's really important to know about him is that he was a member of my executive team. So he had full knowledge that the things that he placed in that action against me were false because he was there while all of the things that he discussed were happening.
So what point did he leave the office after you elected, or just went back to when did he leave?
Before I took office for the second time.
Between November and the spring in January?
Yes.
Were there any other investigations undertaken by the prior administration that were politicized against anybody else?
I can't speak to that. I know about this one, and that's the one we're talking about right now.
I was wondering if you could speak to the way that the criminal cases against Carolyn Kennedy were treated, both by this office and by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Do you feel like the outcome of those cases was influenced by politics?
I can't speak to that today. Okay? I may speak to it at a certain time in the future, but today I can't speak to it. Okay?
Any just reaction in the last week? Obviously, Orange County's been under the spotlight of the state and attorney general. Obviously, what you went through, having been reviewed. Did you have any conversations last week with the mayor and commissioners? Just what did you think of the whole situation unfolding under the threat of seeing a whole commission removed, just like you were?
So here's the thing that I think is really important for the media. We need to stop talking about the removal of duly elected officials as though this is some type of normal. I gave a press conference a few years ago after my removal where I talked about us losing democracy and how it's the equivalent of boiling a frog alive, right? If you stick a frog in hot water, he'll immediately jump out. But if you put him in room temperature water and then slowly turn it up, you could literally boil him alive. I fear that we are in a place where we have gotten accustomed to the unjust removal of duly elected officials as though it's normal. And I'm here to tell you it's not, and we shouldn't consider it normal. The voters, not other elected officials, are the ones who make decisions about who represents their communities, and we should not lose sight of that, lest we lose sight of our democracy.
Tommy Ziegler's in court today.
He was this morning.
Arguing that evidence should overturn past 20 or 30 years. Do you believe that this evidence is strong enough, or do you believe in the evidence that was presented back when he was first convicted?
So my previous statement on this is that I advocated for Mr. Ziegler to have his day in court. I believe that the death penalty is so serious that if there is advancement in evidentiary testing processes, that we should allow people who were convicted earlier to take advantage of the newest testing that's available to them if they choose to do so in order to prove their innocence. That was the extent of my advocacy on this issue. After a thorough review by my Conviction Integrity Unit, it is their position that the state cannot stand with Mr. Ziegler in what he believes that the testing of the evidence shows.
That is State Attorney Monique Worrell, who is the state attorney for Orange and Osceola counties, speaking at a news conference live in Orlando now, where she talked about a lawsuit that has been filed accusing her of destroying records, of urging people in her office to destroy records when during her first time in office several years ago. She denies that, says she never directed anyone to destroy records. She said that is an investigation that was politically motivated, says believes she's the target of an investigation that was launched just 2 days after her re-election. So that is the news from the state attorney. We'll have more coverage of that coming up at 4 o'clock on Fox 35 News Plus. Thanks for joining us here on Florida Live. Here's a live look at iDrive on this Thursday afternoon.